Good morning. I will speak in English, although most people know me as being Dutch, but I've understood there are some people who are not Dutch speaking here. And of course the audience online appreciates its being in English. My name is Michiel Scheffer, or Michael Scheffer in English. I'm born in the UK, so I'm a bit British. And I will look from, let's say, an academic perspective, but also a political perspective to, let's say, circular textiles. My experience is I have a 30 years career in textiles, but my hobby is politics, and I was for a while something you call a fractievoorzitter in the Provinciale Staten. So I was a provincial politician, and I spent 4 years as gedeputeerde, that is, let's say, a regional minister. And then I lost the election, and I'm back at textiles. And that's exactly what I want to do, because there are few politicians with textile experience. I want to make the bridge, because there are a lot of big challenges ahead that require a different type of management and, let's say, more political skills. I'm now working at Wageningen University Research. Wageningen is a well-known university, but less known is that we have also textile activities. So that's for many people here today and yesterday something of a discovery. But Wageningen has a long tradition of textiles, because we hosted for a very long period of time the Dutch National Flax Institute. Our last flax expert retired last year. But we have a background of that, and we have a lot of background of research in PLAs, for example, let's say polymers made of bio-based resources. So we're based in Wageningen, 25 kilometers south of here. Our mission is to explore the potential of nature to improve the quality of life. That's our mission. It's always very useful to have a mission. And we do a number of activities, from very basic fundamental research on genetics of plants, up to having boots on our 300 hectares of farmlands to help farmers to improve crop methods in flax, for example, but also in potatoes. So we are a contract research and an academic institution. And we have a textile program with, let's say, a broad range of issues, from basically the field, the genetics of the plant, up to why do consumers buy certain products. And also policies. We also are the National Policy Institute on Agriculture, so we also guide ministries on what to do. The key themes we are covering are written here. I'm not going to present everything, so please have questions later on. But quite important is to, let's say, to make the key philosophy from now to 2050, we have to change the whole textile world from fossil-based, 100 million tons worldwide, to fully bio-based. So we have to go back somehow to where we stood in 1850. So without polyester, without polyamides, without much of, let's say, viscose type fibers, and be entirely bio-based. That's a huge challenge. That's a challenge that will cost the world something between 2,000 and 3,000 billion euros. 2,000 to 3,000 billion euros need to be invested by the world between now and 2050 to make the transition. That's huge. The industry is far from investing that. So I'm quite negative. I don't think we will reach it, but well, let's try. And we want to be part of that exercise. And that requires changing a lot of things. Our fibers, our processes, the value chain, prices, behavior in the value chain. The retailers had to be in charge now. I mean, they've won. They've broken everything. So they have to steer the value chain, because the fiber manufacturers no longer can do that. And also the policies, and you will have a presentation on policy changes today, had to change as well. And an important element of that is also that governments, or let's say everyone who buys workwear, can play a role. And in most policies you will see that public procurement plays a role in trying to make that transition towards circular textiles. So there are, let's say, a number of challenges that you see in public policies. So I made with my civil servants in Gelderland a plan to make Gelderland circular. I said you 3,000 billion euros investment. We have a 3 million euro plan, so that's also far too little. But okay, it was a start. But you see a number of elements coming in, let's say, most government policies or regional policies or local policies. One is very important, is that by 2025, textiles have to be separately collected. 2025, that's in policy terms tomorrow morning. That's very soon. And most are not prepared. Now we are at some percentages, and we have to be at 100%. circular collection in 2025. Well, good luck. The second one is to promote circular citizens' behavior. And so to try to motivate consumers to behave differently. So you see, for example, in Rotterdam North, experiments in a neighborhood to see how consumers can be influenced to buy differently. Very cute. What is also important is the idea that with a circular economy, you can promote a local economy. So, for example, discarding garments, sorting them, and so on. There you see nice myths as well. So, for example, you can remove the plastics out of the garment. So someone asked me, can you remove the elastane out of a garment with people with disabilities? I say, well, if you take a pincette and you would do it for hours, maybe you succeed. So there are realistic and unrealistic things. And the final thing is most governments, national, local, have, let's say, a kind of, we have to give a good example, we should buy circular ourselves as well. So the municipality of Lingewaard with 300 people staff also want to have their clothing sustainably and circular sourced. What you will have to monitor is that you have different plans. So if you are interested in what happens, there are different levels of plans. You have, let's say, there's a European strategy that will come out definitely this fall. And there will be something of, let's say, an appeal to make circular economy action plans. So basically each public authority has to make for its region, its city, its country, a circular economy action plan. And that's now voluntary, but it will become compulsory. And in some of those, you will see circular textile action plans. So some cities make a specific segment on textiles, either because they're big, Rotterdam, for example, or they have a real or a perceived textile history. So Twente has one, and Groningen also has one. Twente because it has a textile history, and Groningen because it thinks it has one. And what you also have your sector commitments. For example, all the academic hospitals have a joint plan on circular sourcing. And there's also a package within that on workwear. Then let's say a lot of local authorities make afvalbeheersplannen. We call that in Dutch. That's basically the plan to move to 2025 to have total circular collection of, separate collection of textile waste. And what you see is, let's say, that a lot of local governments have made circular buying programs. So the buying office has now a kind of, let's say, overall view of how to buy circular. The most recent one, that was not in the presentation, yesterday the 12 provinces presented their circular bid, hoping that it will be part of the next government strategy of the Netherlands. Well, what is important with circular textiles is that you have to keep in mind, if you're a public authority or if you supply to a public authority, how important is it? Is it something you need as well, or is it a key critical item? So sometimes workwear is a very essential input into an organization. I think that for an academic hospital, the workwear is quite central because basically everyone in the hospital wears it. And it's important for the presentation, it's important for the safety of the workers, it's important for the safety of the patients. But in some organizations, only a very small minority of people wear workwear. For example, in the province of Gelderland, people wearing workwear were the drivers, the people at the front office, and the guys maintaining the roads. So of 1,200 people, around 40 people wear workwear. So then it's basically a non-critical item. Or if it's important, we have to give a good example. It's maybe a bottleneck item, something it's nice to have, but it's not essential. And so that's important to keep in mind. How important is the workwear, the textile package for the client, or if you're the client, for yourself? And what we did in Gelderland is to do something like this. So for all the products we sourced, we made a kind of network of how important is each item. And in the province, for example, we have 40 people wearing workwear, and we spend 400 million euros on public works, roads, cycle path, railways. So that's a very essential thing. And so experimenting and and investing in, let's say, the best possible roads is an important item, much more than clothing. And so each different organization will have, let's say, different items on this panel with very symbolic things and with, let's say, well, things that you need, but it's not essential, pencils, and things that are, let's say, key to your organization. So if you look at your organization, or if you supply them, try to imagine where circular clothing fits in this model. It's also important to have realistic expectations. And the first one is that in general, let's say public procurers are not very big users of textiles. So a big organization might reach 2 tons of textiles a year, but there's a guy here who needs 250,000 tons a year to recycle. He's in Giovanni's here. Also for Frankenhuis is investing in a new shredding line, sorting and shredding line of 4,000 tons. 2 ton is basically some hours of recycling work. Also an average weaver in Belgium, weaving workwear fabrics, weaves around 2,000 tons a year. So any public authority is a relatively small player. It's also, workwear especially, is a very complicated product. It needs to fit in PPE requirements, it has aesthetic requirements, people must like to wear it, otherwise they won't wear it. It has, let's say, complicated washing requirements. It's not an easy category to go from, let's say, non-circular, non-sustainable to sustainable. And what is also important, and that's, let's say, an expectation many politicians have, is that you think that if you make your workwear circular, that you make a huge impact on the fashion sector. No. Because the workwear sector is totally different than the fashion sector. There are very few manufacturers doing both, very few weavers doing both. So the idea that you change consumer attitudes by doing this profession, changing your workwear sourcing, is a bit naive. But let's say I was the only textile person. No, there were 2 textile people in public politics in the Netherlands, but all the other 1,000 people think that they do something huge if they do this. Well, no. And my last realistic comment is don't reinvent the wheel. And there are a lot of, most are here, a lot of weavers, fiber suppliers, workwear manufacturers, laundry companies have already done a lot. But I often see with procurers, even my university sourced for 5,000 people new workwear, and they start from scrap, because they only do it every 10 years. And well, they made a huge range of mistakes, I've already understood. So even our own workwear sourcing was complicated because we made it too complicated for a small group of wearers. So my advice is rather adhere to what others have done than try to invent something new. If I would say some steps to take, I mean, the first thing is never forget why you have workwear or textiles in your organization. It needs to fit with the purpose. And so there's no use of having something sustainable, circular, if it doesn't protect against fire or against bacterial infections or anything else. And so if it doesn't work, don't do it. So that's the first thing. Functionality, and if you have functionality as a key, try also to promote longevity. So basically your product lasts long. That's basically a better investment than using some bio-based hemp. Second, what is also important, workwear only works if it's worn. So keep the involvement of the wearers. So don't go, let's say, into high-end sustainability and you lose your users because it's not comfortable. What is very important is to shift, let's say, in the procurement, the attitude on standards. So don't take standards as, let's say, a shopping list, but take them as a performance requirement. This is what the garment or the textile needs to perform to, and the supplier knows how to fulfill those requirements. What I strongly advise is if you have some bigger volumes, or if you supply bigger volumes, try to promote a market consultation. Sustainability is a new issue. It's a search towards, let's say, a new way of working, and it helps to do, let's say, a contracting in 2 steps. So first a market consultation, and then, let's say, basically an acquisition. And what also helps, and there's a good example here with the Circle A group, is don't buy products, try to buy the service. So there's a lot of communication in fashion about, we should redefine clothing as a service. So you rent your suit instead of buying it. But in workwear, let's say it's very sound to do that. And so, for example, one of the suppliers here has supplied the Gelderland electricity company, and they supplied on a DBFM. So they say, we provide you with safe working conditions, safe working equipment for the next 15 years. And that's also very important. Sustainability is an adventure, and that doesn't fit with 3 or 4 years contract. And so it's an investment, and you want also to promote, let's say, an improvement over time. So it's not you say, okay, these are the standards, this is what I want, and this is my starting point. No, go into an adventure with your supplier, and then a long-term contract helps, because that leads basically financially, let's say, to a much better investment profile for yourself and for the supplier. There is a difference, however, here. I mean, I was a politician in a province that has 4 billion euros on the bank, so we don't care about time. So if it's long-term cheaper, we do it because we have money enough. But also a lot of local authorities don't have money, so they try to have, let's say, the lowest impact on that year budget. That's penny wise, pound foolish. Goedkoop, duurkoop. But that's an important element to keep in mind. So try, if you have an influence on it, try to go for the longer contract period as possible. Put performance central, and ask your supplier to, let's say, to evolve in terms of, let's say, sustainability. You will have a lot of speeches on sustainability. It's, of course, a complicated matter. It's not, let's say, one dimension. There are many dimensions, and you have, let's say, to look at, let's say, the materials. You have to look at design. You have to look at fair production conditions. You have to look at the sustainability of the operations themselves. The washing and the laundry has a much bigger environmental impact than the two first ones. And we are beyond the stage of cherry picking. Say, okay, I take some funny items and then that's it. No, you have to look at all the elements, but not necessarily at the first place. So the 15 years contract helps you to say, okay, I start with this package, but I want to move on to, let's say, a number of conditions that are going further. There are good examples. So I mentioned some of them. I mentioned already that all the university hospitals have already a common platform. So there's no need of reinventing the wheel for university hospitals. They have a basis, and Radboud has been leading with it because the vice chairman of Radboud is chairing a committee on circular sourcing of hospitals. Gelre Ziekenhuizen is also by coincidence in my province, but it's also a good example of a non-academic hospital being leading. The Ministry of Defense is a quite small organization in the Netherlands. It has also side impacts, but is still, let's say, a leading buyer, and also does a lot of coordination of buying and knowledge, let's say, for all the public sector. Of course, there are a lot of standards, so I would always advise rather adhere to standards, even if there are too many, and they're not, let's say, comprehensive. You need several to cover the whole subject. And what is also important, some are here, you have already clusters of partners working together. So a fiber supplier, a clothing manufacturer, a laundry organization, in this case also a groothandel, a wholesaler, and a recycler. And also, if you look at weavers, I've been a bit fair. So there's an Indian weaver working on it. There's an Italian weaver, a French, a Belgian. So let's say a lot of textile suppliers have already, let's say, a circular or a sustainable offer. And the same is true for clothing manufacturers. I mentioned them without looking at the list of exhibitors. Some are here. There's also an offer present. So I said, don't reinvent the wheel. Look at what is present. You can also settle something of a minimum. This is the minimum I want to have now. So let's say a fair one is to say, my supplier needs to be adhering to the Covenant Duurzame Kleding, and preferably in a, let's say, a progressive manner. There are different levels to that. Design for recycling is also a minimum that you can ask, although there's room for maneuver in there. You can have minimum requirements for sustainable fabrics. There is enough offer to do that. For example, Den Haag has recently a tender out with, let's say, kind of minimum standards, and it was complained it was too high, but we checked it on their behalf with a number of weavers. It is feasible. Don't forget the washing. And I would also say, if you are a small sourcer, I would go to the laundry directly. Don't go to a clothing manufacturer. Don't go to a textile manufacturer. Go to a laundry company, a textile service company, and use them as your intermediate. And no, let's say invest in lifetime expectations. So let's say long-term use. So be realistic. You will have opposition if you are too ambitious. accept that. People will say, "Oh, this is too ambitious. We will go in court to resist your terms of reference." But that is something you could expect. Don't reinvent the wheel. Work with others. Pool buying power. So don't source yourself. But if you're small, work with others. And I would also say balance your internal effort and your external outreach. For example, Wageningen spent 1 year making a terms of reference. Well, that's too long and too expensive, and it didn't work out fully. So go swiftly outside and don't spend too much time, let's say, trying to get everything on order inside. 0. Thank you for your attention. If you have questions, I will be at the stand in the middle of the hall, so you can always come to me there. Thank you.